right, it's always fun to have an alum come back to school. Born in New York, raised in the Bahamas, tonight's speaker grew up going to sea, hired at age 18 to race from Marion to Bermuda. At age 21, he sailed from Antigua to the UK to attend university. It was in the Galapagos at age 23 that he first made captain. Operating a commercial fleet of tankers in Singapore, he suffered the loss of crew to explosions, groundings, hijacking, rocket, and knife attacks. Following his fourth round-the-world trip delivering yachts, which saw him go overboard and lose a vessel to an engine room fire, he returned to land to earn a master's in marine affairs and a Juris Doctorate in maritime law. A licensed captain for 30 years, he has crossed oceans, operated hundreds of vessels, and been attacked by sharks twice. A historian and a writer, he's the author of over 40 nonfiction books and hundreds of articles. We welcome back Eric Wiberg, class of 1986.
Good evening, everyone. And you're living some of the happiest years of my life. And so there's a degree of envy in being here. So thank you for having me. And these are photos taken when I was at Eaglebrook. So the photo on the right was on the island opposite my family's hotel. We had a small hotel with a lot of international visitors. And shortly after the photo was taken, so was my snorkeling gear. It was also taken. So I learned to be on the alert. This is a propeller of a B-26 Marauder aircraft. It's very distinctive, and that was found just about 300-400 feet off the shore of the Bob Marley Resort, owned by his widow, Rita Marley. So it was kind of neat. The person who helped keep me safe was Rita Marley and Bob Marley's stepson, Jay Marley. So that was kind of fun. He's a famous musician. I'm hoping this will work. One button. Okay. There we are. So I had two brothers and a sister, and we made our own sailboats and borrowed our mother's sheets in the Bahamas, where I grew up. And that's us sailing this little contraption into a lake. Went to summer camp in South Carolina and really enjoyed it and enjoyed sort of getting sort of dirty, as you can see. I liked going out in the woods and finding what was in the woods. So what happened when I was staying home and one of my parents was ill, and I didn't feel that I was able to do much to help them. So I focused a lot of energy on finding a plane that I had found as a young person, and for that reason, I was finally able to find this airplane. So one of the distinctive features, this looks like a seat, like what you're using now, but it actually has a handle, and that was the emergency hatch, so the pilot could release the hatch and live. In this instance, unfortunately, because of hurricane and the wave conditions, they weren't able to live. But I single-handedly kind of pulled this off the seafloor and was trying to swim it to shore, and a boater took pity on me and helped me. So, but he could only take me so far, and so he dropped me off about 100 feet from the shore, and it was a tourist resort. So they thought it was rather funny and odd that I should pull this huge thing. You know, this is 6 feet by 4 feet. It's an airplane engine, you know, and I managed to pull it onto the beach, at which point I sort of collapsed in exhaustion. And that was the first time in 70 years that this aircraft had seen the light of day, and had been sitting off a major resort, Cable Beach Resort in the Bahamas, for 75 years, and nobody had bothered to find it. So I thought that was really interesting. And this here is a camera, and it was switched to off, but I wonder, you know, what if they had switched it on in their final moments? They could have hit land, as you'll see in a lot of other instances, but they didn't want to hurt anyone. So they skipped over land and landed in the ocean. And again, it was because of the hurricane that their calculation didn't work. One of the young men was from Halifax. He was single, and then the other was from Toronto, and he had a wife and child. And I'm in touch with those families. I met one of them in Niagara. And, the military is very thorough, and they had an inventory of everything in their room, these young men, and it was very sad. And the part that I thought was most poignant, sort of cufflinks, one pair, golf clubs, one. It said, book one, me and my father, or getting to know my father, And I just thought how that father would feel when he learned that that was his son's last possession. But it was with great relief that the family learned what actually happened, because there's a lot of inaccuracies. It turns out on this site they had laid flowers and had a ceremony with what they called the padre. So here we are. This was an interesting case. I took this photo for my son because a lightning storm hit us quite quickly, and the technology was so low that I used one of those plastic throwaway cameras. So I took that with the island in the background so that he would know, what happened, if the lightning hit me, which fortunately it didn't. But there I am, pulling stuff off the seafloor onto a surfboard I got from my mom. And then this is very interesting. So these two stories are fascinating. I don't know if there are any students here from China, but this aircraft was on its way to China. And it's on the base of the lighthouse. And before I went and got the wreck, it's the only airplane I found using Google Earth. And so I found that there were these streaks of wheels that ended in a big hole. And that the guy had admitted that he had landed in a pond. And near the lighthouse, the old guy from the lighthouse spent 18 years on the island. He'd never seen a plane. So I thought, I must be crazy. There's no way, But I found it. He simply never bothered to go down to the lake. And it was supposed to be a lake. So we brought a week's supply of stuff. And there's the captain that I asked to guide me, because locals generally know a lot more. And he was very angry. You see, he's disappointed. He's turned his back on me because we found it in 6 minutes from landing on the beach. And he wanted 4 days of camping and looking. So he's like, where's my paycheck? This is boring. You found the plane in the first few minutes. Also, it was supposed to be a lake, but you'll notice that the lake was salt. So, walk on it. We didn't know that. This is interesting, too. This is a reverend in Bahamas from Salinas, part of the Forbes family. They're reverend, policemen, hoteliers. They work for the government. It's a very small community. It's Bahamian and also some Haitians. So this is what's called, it's very, very rare. This is an unsecured. It's the same type plane as the other, meaning the U.S. government never went and took away the secret codes, friend or foe, all the weapons, all that stuff that's sensitive. They never bothered getting it because it was abandoned in midair, and the plane nosedived on its own, and no one really knew how to find it. So the pilot came out of the woods with a parachute. And they thought he was a ghost, He's this strange guy coming out of the woods. And everyone was working in the forest, making this drink called Campari in Italy. And you shave off, it's very hard work. You shave off the bark, and then you soak it, and you sell it to Italy. So what happened was the school was in session when this plane crashed. And the headmistress of the school was rather worried for the safety of the students. So she told them all to scatter. It was quite a story. That parachute, by the way, became 2 wedding dresses and 1 christening dress. So it was made out of material given by American women who'd worn the hosiery, but gave it when Japan went to war with us, vice versa. What happened was we couldn't get any more silk from Japan, so we had to use polyester, hosiery. So, by the way, I begged this gentleman. I had walked all the way from the lighthouse, from a mailboat. I got off the mailboat, and I walked 4 hours at night, I think 4 or 5 hours, on a road alone, carrying all my luggage. It was a little unusual. The dogs ran away. They didn't attack me. And I said, hey, can I contribute to your church if you'll help me find, the plane? And he said, well, only if you carry my sticks, because he was cutting hundreds of sticks. So I carried his sticks. And I got to say, that was really hard work. I really admire him, because he was a bit older. So here we are. Yeah, so this is closer to New England. There are over 2,000 airplanes that crash in New England, and so you're never more than a mile or 2 away from an air crash. This is the vehicle I use. You can see it. It's up there by the It's up there by the dining hall. This is a state trooper on the approach to Boston, Logan. I live about 4 blocks from Logan Airport with Caitlin. And so a lot of planes they run out of fuel or they miscalculate and they end up in the swamp southwest of Boston. So most of them survive. This is in Cape Cod Marsh. These are fighter jets. On average, more fighter pilots die in training than they did in combat, which in World War II, a lot of them went towards Japan to fight there. So my country, the Bahamas, you may ask, like, why? Why look for these planes? And the answer is simply, in my country, Bahamas, we found a lot of different things. We found an abandoned hospital 2 blocks from our home. We found an unexploded bomb that was a dud. It was like just a make-believe bomb, a fake for a show, like just in the bush, And then we found this wrecked airplane just off the beach. So the Bahamas were the #1 handover spot for American factories to deliver airplanes, and then they would be taken to Puerto Rico, Brazil, West Africa, and either Gibraltar area or the Middle East. And so a lot of them went to the Soviet Union, and they went all over the world. To carry on the struggle of Allied, so they were basically helping China, helping Russia. Now, one thing that was, and 178 of them crashed in Bahamas. So I was getting pizza in a town near here, and the waitress said that she saw an airplane in the woods, and I thought, okay, well, that must be a really brilliant lead. So I spent about 4 hours going where she told me, and it wasn't an airplane she had found, I determined, but it was rather, just a dump. It was just old cars and old metal. So a lot of this process starts when you're sitting in a library somewhere, and that's where you kind of have your voila moment. Obviously, libraries are pretty quiet, but there's a lot of university libraries, a lot of collections, where people donate their material, and it's a great use to those of us who are trying to figure out what happened to their relatives. You think it's all the internet and so forth, but we then type this up and put it onto the internet. But this is called source material, and if you go through your academic career and you want to get a career in a field, you use source material. It's a lot more authentic than listening to somebody else's voice. You learn it yourself, and then you speak with your own voice. So. This is the original. So red ink means there was an accident, and black ink means there wasn't. So this is the fire truck records for Quonset Naval Air Station in Quonset, Rhode Island, right? You'd think it would be boring as all get out. What could they tell you? But here, truck received, new crew took over, out to runway. That's at 12 o'clock. Here, received call to go to crash at Davisville. Truck number 3 responded. Also ambulance, and then they go on, and then they talk about putting out fires, helping airplanes, all kinds of stuff. One of my favorite entries was a British pilot, and the Americans went out with a couple trucks, and they said, okay, the pilot had landed with the nose down, and they said, hey, let us show you how to save your plane. And the British said, no, that won't be necessary. Thank you very much. He hopped out of the fighter, he grabs the wheel, pulls the plane down, and then hops in, starts the engine, and motors away. And the Americans were like, huh? So, I'm sure you all know that during World War II, a handful of British boys your age showed up, and Mr. Chase, I think, said, how can we help you? And they said, our country's being bombed. Could you educate us for a couple of years? And he said, sure thing. Make yourself comfortable. And they graduated. So not only bad things happened. It's a gross simplification. But, so here we go. So here, this is a couple weeks ago. This is in Rhode Island. And I realized from the records that this little pond in Davisville, Sawmill Pond, had a school on both ends. So I wrote both headmasters. They knew nothing about it. And a fellow named Asplund had a collision. So they had to train very aggressively, and sometimes they would hit each other. And it didn't end well normally. So one of them landed in front of a hotel, and this fellow landed in the pond. Unfortunately, he didn't survive. But I got the fire truck records, and they, they led to this pond, right? And they said 50 yards off the pond from Newhouse Street or something. And I found this gentleman sitting there kind of in a chair. It turned out it was kind of a wheelchair. And I said, can you help me find this plane? He said, yeah. He said, I have a lot of pain. And I built, he said, on his free time, he rode out, and he built a little platform on this island. And he said, I know the plane is under there because it's got gravel, and that's why, So I went out with my kayak, and I measured. It's only about 2 feet. And I measured that, that's where the plane is. Now, it was pretty darn cold. It was snowing, and I had him as a spotter. But it was quite dangerous. I don't like to take unnecessary risk. I have a child who's a teenager, and he has me carry an emergency position indicating radio beacon. So I have 2 of them, and the trick is you have to activate them. You have to register them to your name so that Caitlin will get the call, and then you have to, one is a 12-mile range for local, and the other is like the holy cow one, and that's for aircraft, jets, satellites, everything. You pull that thing, and you get a helicopter over in a few minutes, but only after they call and verify who you are and what you do. So I said, I find airplanes in exotic places, so they'll know it's me. I had one call once, are you driving a yacht across North Dakota? And the Kenyan captain I work with was towing a yacht across Dakota at 90 miles an hour. And then the EPIRB had shaken free. So they knew it wasn't a boat, but they were verifying. So this is one of the, if you find a plane near Eaglebrook, this is one of the enduring legacies. The Ranger was an aircraft carrier that had left Rhode Island and was heading up to Halifax, and they encountered extreme weather, and they did not want all the aircraft to be destroyed, and the pilots as well. So they ordered all the pilots to scramble and just get off the aircraft carrier and fly for land, but the instructions were not clear. So, it was extremely bad weather, and they weren't clear which airstrip they were going for, so almost all of them went missing. And a lot of them, crashed and were found that way. And this poor fellow was seen north of Providence at around 4 o'clock, rather heard in the clouds and not seen since. So naturally, you look in all the ponds and all that. And then there's a lot of sad shovel work. You got to try to find out, right? So there are records that every state coroner files about what happened to people who were unclaimed. And you try to match them, with. So I've tried everything, and I haven't found this gentleman, but. For some, this becomes a passion. Like there's a man who this is his life work to find Cassidy. So we all have our quirks, right? But it'll be great if he finds him. But there we have. Let's see. Oh yes, this was an interesting story. So my girlfriend's parents moved to the Cape Cod area, and I thought maybe I can find a plane near their house and make them like me or like me more. And so I did. So I found a pond about 4 miles from their home, and I told the local community by dive shop websites. I said, hey, look, have you all heard of this plane? And they said, give us a week, we'll give you an answer. Well, a week later, they said, absolutely, definitively, there is no plane in that pond. So I spoke to a couple captains, and I spoke, again, to the fire department, and I learned that you need to go a certain distance into a pond from the trees so as not to hit the trees. Also, the guy jettisoned the fuel and set fire to a forest, which told me which direction he was coming from. So I had a new mask. At around noon, I started swimming with my kayak alone, and I swam for the Bahamas, so I know how to swim. There was no pool here at Eaglebrook, unfortunately. So what happened was, after 10 minutes, I was going to give up. And after 20 minutes, I found the plane. And it was about the size of this, it was a big plate of aluminum with very specific mechanical stuff for a jet. It was a nuclear-capable jet. So it had very specific, it didn't have nuclear warheads. And then the story behind how this guy lived is amazing. So this is a baker. He's a baker from Arlington, Massachusetts. And he was the only person on the lake. And so the guy that ran the Marshall Plan in Europe, the airdrops, right? He was in charge of the mission, the training, and he got this guy's attention. Well, he was just, summarizing his house in May. And so he didn't really pay attention, but he pulled an old leaking boat out into the lake very bravely, to save this man, Mr. Noy, who was now swimming because his plane sank, right? And so he went and he got to Noy, and Noy was almost dead. He was freezing. So this gentleman, Godlinski, he put Noy between his legs to keep him warm and rowed all the way to shore. And the chief was flying over the whole time, directing the whole thing. And the other guys landed their plane and hopped in a jeep and ran around and started swimming to rescue their friend. But they didn't have to because this fellow already had. So it's really just a lot of humor. There's the pond. Now that we've... so it's not as easy as just looking at Google Earth, right? You've got to... you've got to look at the different bathymetry, which is the deepest. 70 feet is too deep for me normally. I can do it, but I'm not comfortable staying down there with no tank, and so I worked on an oil rig salvage job in the Bahamas, and they were having me go down to communicate with the divers to 70, even deeper, and that's not a good idea. So I knew my limits, Well, part of being good at something is not necessarily knowing what you can do, it's what you can't do, knowing your limits, because, you want to come back, right? You're a lot more important than any airplane or anything else out there. So this is just details. And then someone was on the pond and took a picture because the kids all wanted to see the plane. So this is part of the plane. You see the rivets and the air vents and the thing on the left, and it was really fun. It ended up on the front page of the paper, so I got to keep my girlfriend by impressing her parents by finding a plane. So, there's no limit to what you can achieve, So it was really fun, That's one of the ones that end well. This one didn't end so well. They were flying down to Miami, and they ran out of fuel because basically the pilots fell asleep, and that's not very advisable. But they fell asleep and ran out of fuel, and they ended up in the Bahamas. They were supposed to be in Miami. This is a classic, I think, DC-10 or something. Anyway, so they're the people. See, there's people up here. They got a fire, no water. Ironically, the plane crashed in the water. But, so there's a lot of aircraft wrecked out there. Let's see. Okay, so these are just things. This is Tabor Academy up in Marion, and I was told that a bomber crashed there in the radio tower field. So I spent a couple days, poking around. Unfortunately, there's so much junk, there that you don't know what's real and what isn't. So a lot of it is somewhat unexciting. You find a wheel, you're not sure if it's a wheel from a plane or a car or a truck, So those are some of the challenges, but that was not a success. During World War II, there was a lot of males had gone to war, even just non-combat roles, and so skilled women were needed, and many of them were flying the airplanes out of the factory in order to test the airplanes. And also to, basically to test the planes, see if they're safe, right? And so when you do that, you crash, like a lot, if the plane's never been flown. So one of the great bases was the Grumman Aircraft Company in Bethpage, I think, Long Island. And so they were testing over water a lot. Before telling the case of Elizabeth Hooker, age 27, one of thousands of female pilots, I just wanted to say that Rockaway Beach, has anyone heard of Rockaway Beach in Long Island? You have? Okay, great. Very popular swimming spot for New Yorkers, right? And what would happen when these planes would fail, they were just small fighter planes, they would fail and they would look for somewhere safe to land, and often they would land on the beach. Well, in the winter, that's okay, because nobody's on it. In the summer, it's not okay. And once it landed on the beach and injured some people, it was very tragic. So there was an unwritten rule that if you're going to fail, with your plane, don't land on the beach in the summer, but they would land on the water just off the beach. And what would happen is, as they were sinking and trying to get out of their aircraft, the dads would swim out to the boat, to the plane, and rescue them. So they created their own little culture, right? They didn't want to hurt the families, and the dads wanted to reward the guys that didn't hurt their families. So, so everyone survived. It's actually very sweet. It's very touching, I think. So I lived in Norwalk for a bunch of years, and we used to go to a place called Stu Leonard's. And behind Stu Leonard's, where I used to play rugby, this female pilot, her plane crashed in a pond. She actually bailed out and landed in Norwalk Harbor and was rescued by a lady, and they sent a seaplane from Grumman, and she was working that afternoon. That's life. But the plane was abandoned and landed in a pond. So I remember landing at the pond, and I had a rope, and I tied it to my vehicle, and I started walking into the pond. And two people were walking their dog as a couple, and they were both teachers. I said, would you mind like just listening if I start like screaming, like, or blowing my whistle? Oh, okay, no problem, no problem. So I walked into the marsh, out of sight for half an hour, and they listened patiently. Never met them, and then afterwards, they helped pull me back out of the marsh. So I didn't find anything. I found a lot of shopping carts, but yeah. So this is one of my favorites. One of the best things ever is local knowledge. Local knowledge. So how does that, you've all heard of that, right? And how do you get local knowledge? Well, obviously if you bang on someone's door and say, tell me what you know, they're going to slam the door in your face most of the time or not open it. So one of the tricks that I developed was I'd go, if I knew there was a plane within a quarter mile, I would go and just park my car and like take out a map and like look lost. And you may say, who uses a map today? Well, old people use maps. And old people know more about history a lot of the times than local history than young people. So if I sit out, it almost always works. I sit out in a field with a map. It's upside down, right? Some old farmer comes up. Oh, what are you looking for, son? Yeah, how can I help you there, boy? Oh, yeah, sir. I was looking for this airplane. Oh, I know that. My Uncle Bob, he rescued those folks, And you're like, oh, well, thank you so much. I had no idea. An airplane, I think it's called mansplaining. But I loved it. I loved it. So this is Cummington. So I drive around in Massachusetts and sort of look on my map for a nearby wreck, and a fighter, crashed in Cummington. So I went to, spoke to some old timers, and they said, oh yeah, I know that wreck. So when we were kids, we used to go and poke around that wreck, and we found a whole crate of ammunition, and it was Remington. It was wonderful. It was a whole crate, and and then they told us where it went eventually. So me and my cousins, we used to, take the boxes. And I'd say, well, where'd you take the boxes? Oh, yeah. Oh, Farmer Smith's barn up on 149, up on Orchard Road. So here's the barn on Orchard Road, right? And the barn's collapsed. And I got on my hands and knees, and I looked carefully under the collapsed building. Sure enough, there's some crates of ammunition, and here it is. And I just reached in, and wouldn't you know, I got a little sample. It's a Remington 505 machine gun ammunition, MG. So, I just needed firewood, right? But, the barn was collapsed, and I'm not recommending. Under maritime law, you're allowed to take a small sample, like this is a foot pedal of a Cessna. You're allowed to take a very small sample to prove that you found something, right? And that's indisputably part of an aircraft, right? And you can have a look at some of the examples here. So now, earlier last week, I was in the Bahamas looking for this plane, and this is the plane that has caused me the most difficulty, we could say. I got some support from an Eaglebrook alumni's dad at one point to do these trips. I'm from Bahamas, so they have direct flights to the Bahamas, and I would go down and look for this plane. And the reason I can't let this one go, this is my tenacious, quest, if you will. The archaeologist of the Bahamas who was with me, Dr. Pateman, he was with me. Every member of my team, 3 people, after 2 days, we had to throw away all our footwear. It was damaged beyond repair. Nothing, no heel was attached. Nothing. It was unwearable. So we've never been able to find it. We walked 20 days, and we've walked about 15 miles in swamp, in mangrove, every kind of condition. And the gentleman, he could never walk. Zay Book. He was the radio operator. So think of the radio like the internet. Like he was unable to walk, handicapped, whichever the term, and he had a personality. He was a best-selling radio guy. He wrote books on how to be a professional radio operator. He flew all around South America. He set the world record for flying to Bermuda. And they landed 3 times, and he used to sit on the wings to get fresh air. They took off from the fuel tanks filling up from the motion of being an anchor in Bermuda, and they took off with the anchor and the radio dial going. And the airplane was pilot radio. It's owned by Isidor Goldberg, Austrian refugee from Europe, and also a chicken farmer, a brilliant guy, helped promote the television from Lowell, Massachusetts, and Brooklyn. So an amazing story. And this plane was the first to land in Bermuda. And I have a spark plug. And this is a Wright Brothers engine. The Wright brothers invented flight, at least in the U.S., worldwide. And this is the plane upside down in my country, the Bahamas. So I'm after those wheels and that engine. The Smithsonian would like to have it too. So here we go. So here they are. You notice, there he is, Book, on top of the plane. This is them getting an award in Bermuda. Initially, they were arrested and fined. There was supposed to be a reward, but Bermuda didn't know what to do with them. And they realized, okay, we should probably pay them and award them. So they did. They did. So there they are getting their flowers. And so I went to Bermuda last September. Is there anyone here from Bermuda? Normally there's one or two. Oh, there you go. Excellent, excellent. I've sailed there 33 times. I'm a big fan. So what happened was I went to Bermuda. I walked into the newspaper office and I said, hey, I'm looking for a plane. They threw me on the front page. They're like, this young man is looking for a propeller. So I got more invitations. I found 9 propellers in 2 days. At the Royal Bermuda Yacht Club at 9 at night, someone I'd never met before said, hey, I own an island nearby with a propeller. Why don't you hop on my boat? I'll take you. I told my son, say no if someone says that to you. But I went and I saw the propeller, and there it is. There's the propeller. So, and this is the spark plug. There's the spark plug. They said nobody in 95 years, nobody had ever asked to see that spark plug. When they took the airplane apart, they had some extra spark plugs and they gave them away for thank yous, to people, that helped. And almost all of what I do is volunteer. It's all people helping each other, and it was really neat. So there's the spark plug, and my goal is to find the engine and connect the spark plug from Bermuda with the airplane that crashed in Bahamas. So that would be kind of fun. This is the story of the airplane that crashed in Bahamas. They left Puerto Rico and they crashed in Exuma. So I've been so far, like I say, many, many trips. So this is my son, who's 17, Felix, and this is us 2 weeks ago. That's Felix on the hands and knees in the mangroves. The water had dried out in the dry season, which in theory made it easier, but the fact is it made it a lot more difficult. So we're both literally having to crawl, hoping that we're going to bump into a propeller, or an airplane. There's our rental car. Again, all your clothes is ruined, but you get a sense of adrenaline. I stay with my cousin. The head of the Navy helps us. The head archaeologist helps us. So it's quite, it's kind of neat. When I do find an airplane, I normally yell really loudly, and that normally attracts boaters and other people to find out what's going on. So I once got a free lunch in that pond in Mashpee from yelling really loudly. I don't recommend it, but it's not every day you find a plane. This is my cousin. That's a tug. That's the head of the Navy, Dr. Roll, Commodore Roll. These are just some pictures of the various research that you do when you go to the National Archives. You try to figure out who owned the land. But I wanted to go. This is what we thought was the plane. So I'm not convinced it is, but that was supposed to be a window. And so we went to a museum in Rhinebeck, New York, and looked at the actual plane, which is this one here. So that's the type of plane. It's a Stinson Detroiter. I have interest from the Smithsonian, from the Detroit Museum, the Wright Museum, all that stuff. Sometimes you get stumped, though. I said, I think I can find a Wright Brothers engine from 1926. And they said, you realize both of them were dead in 1926. So you always meet people that are smarter than you. Mrs. Chase, this is a shout out to you. Thanks to Mrs. Chase for inspiring. So I'm going to let you guys speak. I just want to speak a moment before the question and answer, and that is kind of why do it, right? Because if you understand what motivates people, and many of you will become leaders, and when you're a leader, understanding what motivates people is really going to help you react and respond to them better. If you know what their real wish is, not everyone wants money, not everyone wants power. Some people want love, they want recognition, they want whatever. The arts operate under a whole different rules sometimes than the business world. So for me, this gentleman who is the head archaeologist, he asked me a simple question. He said, nobody in our country has found as many airplanes as you have, as quickly as you have. He says, how is that possible? Why? Like, how? And I told him my answer is very simple. I said, Mike, I don't give up. I don't give up. there are times to give up. There are times to recognize, we have a rule at sea. If you're going to rescue someone and it's going to put your own people at risk, you don't have to rescue someone. Like, you have to look after your own people first, right? Like, don't kill people trying to save people necessarily. So it's a delicate correlation. But if you don't give up, you have a lot more success in general, And a lot of the time it isn't easy, and a lot of the time you don't find it right away, But you make friends, you forge relationships, you forge exchanges, Right now, almost all my trips, someone's sharing something, opening their door to put you up, sharing meals, sharing transport, sharing something, right, or knowledge, And then last of all, my hero is a gentleman named Samuel Eliot Morison. Has anyone heard of him? He's an American. Basically, he came from a life of privilege up in Boston. His cousin was T.S. Eliot, and he was a professor at Harvard and also a professor at Oxford, and a very erudite naval historian. And he lived many years, about 80. And there's a statue of him in Commonwealth Avenue, and it says, "Dream dreams, then write them, but live them first." And that's what I think is so important, and that Eaglebrook builds in you, is that it's not just theoretical, it's not just books, it's not just sports, it's mixing all those things together, getting your hands wet, and breaking shoes. Throw your shoes away, They're not supposed to last 30 years, So that's what I would try to inspire, don't give up, and get out and touch things and get dirty, That's the way you find stuff. So are there any questions? Oh.
So any questions?
What other hobbies do you do that are similar to the aircraft chasing? Like, say, rock hounding or geocaching or metal detecting?
That's a good question, and the answer is simple. I write, and so does Caitlin. And my dad read five books a week, and I said, "How do I learn what you've learned?" And he said, "You're not gonna. I'm not going to share it. I'm not going to write about it. I'm not going to tell you about it." So I said, "Well, I'm going to. Like, that's my passion." And when I was at Eaglebrook, it all started because I started writing a diary, and then I got a little sick my last semester. And that, for the first time, I'm kind of hyperactive. And so for the first time, I found myself, living alone at the Deerfield Hospital. And I wrote, and so that's what I do. It's not enough to learn. I have to share it. So I've written 47 books. I've published 1,000 articles. I have a weekly column in a bi-weekly national newspaper. And I try to I write book reviews in one day. I'll get a book, I'll read it, I'll review it, and send it out. And so that's how I keep busy. In terms of getting outdoors, I work in a lighthouse sometimes as a laborer, just moving things up and down. I go to the Bahamas as often as I can. But I don't like to go back to sea. And I wouldn't want my son to go back to sea. So I feel it's too dangerous. There are three kinds of people: the living, the dead, and those that are at sea.
What was your largest plane that you found, and when did you find it?
Good question. So that would be really the first plane I found was a B-26, and that has twin engines and 4 propellers. And I found 45 parts, and I donated them to the museum, which meant that I had to hand pull them without a boat out of the ocean. We found machine guns. There's all kinds of really cool stuff. The camera, really dials, all kinds of neat stuff. And my dad had seen bits of World War II being in Europe as a child, so he protected them literally on our tennis court until the museum could come, and he set up a chair and he would watch them. It was really sweet. Sit there by himself. He's almost 90. And so that was sweet. It was a way to help, give my dad something back as well. So that's the largest plane. A B-26 had a crew of about 8, had machine guns all through it.
What's your favorite plane that you found?
Thank you. I'd have to say the B-26 because the moment I found it, I vowed that I was going to find every single B-26 in my country, and I was able to do that in about 7 or 8 months. We found the bomb door of one, and the guy who perished in it, his mother had been in a convent in Brighton, Massachusetts, and so there are all these really neat backstories, and I interviewed the teachers and all that stuff. So, yeah, I'd have to say the B-20. B-26 was a medium bomber. It was very difficult to fly, and it was very hard to land, but it was used on the raid, the Doolittle raid. It was used in the China, and used out of Egypt to get the southern European oil fields. It was a good mid-range bomber. 7,000 built, 5,000 were scrapped after the war to rebuild Germany. So there's some irony there. It was built to destroy Germany, and then it was cut up to rebuild Germany.
What makes you so engaged to find like crashed airplanes? And is it because of, like bombs or the machine guns?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I like the fact that these planes were going to China. They were going to Africa. So one of the reasons they crashed was because the pilots and they were smuggling rum. Right? It sounds weird to say, but from the American pilots would give the plane over to the British in the Bahamas. So the Bahamas were British. And then in Ascension, you had thousands of men in the middle of the ocean with nothing to do, as they really wanted to drink, like rum and whiskey. So they would pay ridiculous amounts of money. So Bahamas rum was very, very cheap. So they'd fill the nose up with rum and then fly it over to Ascension, between Africa and Brazil, and sell it for thousands of dollars. Well, the problem was they didn't always tell the pilots. So my first plane, I found unopened bottles of rum. I'm from Bahamas. People don't unopen rum. Like, you have rum, you open it, you put it to use. So, so something was very suspicious there. So there's a lot of stories like that. You can find things like the plane I'm looking for now. They did a 20,000-mile goodwill tour of South America. And there's a young man here that lives in Brazil, I think. So South America, so they did a goodwill tour for radios, right? So they have hundreds of little artifacts, stones, jewelry, little knickknacks, things that they would have picked up in 8 months, right? So when you find that plane, you're going to find all those knickknacks and stuff. So, so there are many, many different aspects. And sometimes it's very touching, you know. You're holding the wheel that the fellows were holding, you know, when they died, or the window they were looking out of at night. And, you know, it is very moving. I simplify it by saying, you know, I find the wreckage of people that died trying to protect us, you know, that fell out of the sky. Like, that's why I try to close the loop and tell that story, you know. One more?
People can come up afterwards, look at your artifacts, and also ask you questions.
Oh, yes. Feel free to touch. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, it's great. I really tonight.